So yes, I will be walking through the solution that we have built here in the Environmental Protection Agency in Denmark, mapping habitat nature with AI, or should we call it machine learning in this form, with remote sensing data. I have collected an agenda. This is quite a large topic. We have been working with this for the last 4 years. I've been at the EPA about the same time, and pretty much working with this almost exclusively. So I will take you through the process that we have chosen, the background, the data sources, how we actually, just as Stefan mentioned, how we go through a process of actually getting the noise out of data, making sure that the data, we can preserve the signal so that we can predict at the end what we are interested in, these habitat nature types. And our approach is using a supervised multi-classification algorithm that I will go into. We use a cutout layer where we don't want any predictions because we know there's not going to be any nature types at all in this area. So I'll take you through that. At the end, we are predicting outside the cutout areas as a country-wide prediction, and then we will produce a habitat nature map that we can deliver to EU. The final part I have here is something that we just started, which is what we call human in the loop, which is where we actually feed some information back to the AI, and then we do some retraining based on smarter humans than what we actually have here in the AI. So the team actually started, as I mentioned, 4 years ago. It consists of 4 data scientists, so it's not only me. There are super smart guys in the team. We have domain experts who actually knows a bit about biology. We have legal and those who will be using the maps for maybe decisions going forward as a decision tool. We also had a bit of spot assistance from externals, and we have, of course, a project manager and owner to control what we're doing here. But just a quick one on the background. So according to the EU Habitat Directive 92/43, Denmark is obligated to produce a habitat area map each 6 years. So that's what we are trying to do here in a digital way. Previously, it was done by biologists in booth and walking through these habitat areas. This is a super expensive part to do, and it's also heavy time consuming. So there is also a positive business case here if we get all this to work. All right, so what we are actually looking for are these 44 habitat nature types that I'm sure my biologists, they can certainly talk about, but maybe someone on the call also knows about it. I just outlined a few of those as a photo here. So this is what we will be looking for using a machine learning to actually predict these nature types. And our approach, we had different approaches, but the one that we chose is actually using the actual truth that we got from the biologist. And so we have these areas where the biologists have been out, so we know exactly what's out there. And then we have a manual process that we came about as to optimize we could just have randomly thrown out some training points, but we found that that was not too accurate. So the decision that or the process that we wanted to follow is actually where the biologists, they actually manually add these training dots in our training area. And at the end here, I will be showing an area of Denmark where we have a way of evaluating how well is this machine learning model actually performing. Because the machine learning part, from a data science point of view, we have nice tools that can easily show you the accuracy, the log laws and all that. But when it comes to geospatial data, it's a little more tricky. And I will also show you why that is the case. So our approach is actually building a complete data set that sort of consists of all the relevant data we can extract signals from when it comes to building a machine learning model that can find these different nature types. And as you can see here, I have orthophotos. They are gathered twice a year, spring and summer. They have different resolutions. We have LiDAR data, point cloud data. We have shallow water, groundwater. And we also use Sentinel-1 and 2, radar and optical data. And then we have something now a smart biologist came up with, which is this phenology. So it tells us something about start of season, end of season, gives us some signals that can also sort out the different nature types. It will be too comprehensive to go through all of them, so I have just chosen to go through the first one here, the orthophoto part. So getting raw data from the digital monitoring that we see, and actually grasping the signals without, removing the noise without losing the signal. That is a whole part in this area. And when we look into orthophotos, they are available twice a year in Denmark. They are quite detailed. The resolution is super nice. So it's 12.5 centimeter pixels or 20 centimeter pixels, depending on spring and summer. We use different approaches to squeeze out the best signal that we can use to predict the nature types in the end. And we actually ended up with a wavelet transformation. So we found this interesting article on ResearchGate that actually describes how someone used discrete wavelets and orthophotos for a complete mapping. We found that we wanted to use the data that I showed before. So this is just one set of data. Initially, we actually used a pre-trained convolutional neural network, and then we cut off the last classes, and then we actually got some information from there. But this one was giving us a better performance. So we went through the different levels, and we found that level 2 for us is reducing the noise, but still keeping the signal and giving us the highest accuracy in our models afterwards. So that was actually the first part here. I could have spent a little more time, but wanted to make sure that we also covered our machine learning part. So remember, we have all these different data sources. For each 10 by 10 meter pixel in Denmark, we now have 200 different data features. For instance, the orthophotos that I just mentioned, but we also have all the other earth soil maps and so on. So we sort of have a complete footprint of each 10 by 10 meters in Denmark that we will then use to do actual machine learning, you could say. And this looks something like this. So if you look into Denmark, we have about 50,000 square kilometers. And if you multiply that up by 10 by 10 meters, you have 500 million transactions. So that's the length of the table, you could say. And then we have these 200 data features that I mentioned, from orthophotos, earth, soil, map, sentinel data, and so forth. So that's our training data that we will be exploring in a moment here. With that said, we now have the next level, which is our supervised classification, where we have 55 classes. 44 of them are actually the habitat nature classes that we are going to deliver to the EU. But we also have 11 restricting. So these are sort of classes we want the model to predict in, but we will not deliver it to the EU mapping agency here. And the purpose is actually to throw away the data that are predicted, sort of to use them as a garbage container, you could say, if I may. They are definitely not habitat nature types. This one is actually straightforward. So we take the natural process of dividing the data up into training data and testing data. Then we train our model using Microsoft's LightGBM. Super smooth, nothing fancy here. Something I would say the most fancy thing we are using is actually using Lambda L1 and 2 to restrict the overfitting part and reducing the complexity of the model, so it doesn't just remember all the things it has seen, but it actually stops with a certain complexity. And for those who have been used to code, they will see we use MLflow to store all our models, which I will also be addressing at the end. So what is this gradient boosting machine? Well, gradient boosting machines are actually a lot of decision trees. It's an iterative algorithm. So from start, it produces a set of trees. Then it looks into where it actually did poorly, and then it tries to build on those weak learners, you could say. And at the end, we try to, it does a lot of iterations, and each time it finds an improvement in the model, it will continue. And if you, set it up like we have done here, we said, if you don't improve over 500 iterations, then you're good to go. Then you cannot squeeze any more information out of those data that you gave it. We started with CatBoost that I also saw someone else having presented before. I would definitely not recommend using CatBoost. It is part of Yandex. Yandex has, if you just Google that, close ties to Russia. And for us as a government agency, we are not allowed to use this. But if you look into it, I mean, this is, you can see the experiment here. You have cat boost, light GBM, and extreme gradient boosting. They pretty much produce the same result. So you could swap them up, I would say. And in terms of data science toolbox, we have used the classical way of confusion matrix. And if you're wearing the super good glasses, you will be able to see our 55 classes here. And you can see some of them we are performing well on, and others we are actually not. So there are areas where we can certainly improve. We look into, of course, when we have a dialogue with our domain experts, we look into the different feature importance so that we can see, are we actually gaining something from adding additional data on top of that. However, and that is what I tried to mention in the beginning here, there's a dilemma here with machine learning and geospatial data. What we see is that even though we have a high accuracy on our AI models on test data that the model has never seen, we actually see that when it comes to real life, or you could say from a field biologist side, they are evaluating on polygons, and we have then laid out all these predictions, and they see a different result. So even though you have a high performing model, you could come into a situation, we've seen that, where you, on your holdout data, you are actually either over predicting, or you are actually maybe missing some of the classes that we're looking for. So here you see what our biologists, they gave us. This is the field study, and here on the other side, you actually see the predictions that we gave them. And I will actually just super quickly show what is it actually that we are doing when it comes to trying to evaluate this. And so let's just take into account one small area. I will go down here in the southern part of Denmark, where I have my data. So let's see. This is the area that I showed before. Here you see the different nature habitat types. And this is what we got. We got training data from our biologist. You see these. And I'll just, this convolutes a little bit. So I will just show what is our actual prediction here. So scrolling here, you can see how did we actually do compared to what they gave us. And this is an area where you can say we actually also have some high resolution pictures. This is something new that we recently started with. We have a few areas where we have drone images so that we can sort of optimize, and that is my next point, optimize the points that we have laid out. All right. So as mentioned, we are preparing for the upcoming EU AI Act, where we are, of course, we don't know exactly where it's going to end, but we are preparing for the upcoming EU Act in terms of storing our models, being able to explain our master data, where did they come from. So if there's some kind of dispute, then we will know, okay, we had these training data and we had that model when we did this map. As mentioned, just quickly here, we have some cutout layers that we for sure know that they are already under regulation, so we know exactly what they are, or some other areas where we definitely know that there's no habitat nature here. We just cut those out. That's it. So highlighting, we have our training data, we minus our cutout layers, and then we have what I showed you here at the end. We produce a raster layer of Denmark completely, and then our smart domain experts, our biologists, they can give us some feedback on that, which they do after we have produced the maps. And then we come to this next part that in an overview here is our human in the loop program, where initially we got these training data from our biologist. We trained the model, we predicted, as I showed in the tool before. Then actually our biologists, they go back into the predictions, they look and say, there's some areas here that the model actually was wrong. Maybe with autophotos or with high resolution drone images, they can change these pixels. So they will actually correct the pixels, and then they can give us the corrected data back. We will do a retraining of the model, and then we will do this until we are pleased with the result. And what you see from the human in the loop, something I got from one of our biologists doing this, you can see before the human in the loop was introduced and after the AI was retrained, we see that it is getting a little more conservative in this area, and it's also being better in terms of using these restrictive classes that we have, those that we are actually just throwing away as a garbage bin. So there are improvements if we use this approach. So in terms of summing up, I mean, 3 points here. What we have seen is that more training data, there has to be pristine training points. They tend to provide a better model. And this is something that we are currently working at, increasing the number of training data. And as shown, machine learning evaluation here is not the same as using a training set on a banking data set. It is difficult, or it's something that is more comprehensive to do machine learning evaluation on geospatial data. And you need to work closely with the biologist on this area to make a decent model. And as I think I have shown, data feature pipeline engineering is still at least 80% of the work. The actual machine learning part, I mean, straightforward, I would say, compared to building the pipelines and all that. That was actually my last slide.